So, there was a guy named Abraham Lincoln, and in 1860, he got elected President of the United States. Seems pretty normal, right? Guy gets elected, he becomes president, everybody moves on with their lives, except 7 states immediately decided to leave the country. This enraged Lincoln, who punished them severely. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back a bit. The American Civil War. Brother fought against brother. Over 600,000 people died. The nation nearly destroyed itself. But what actually caused the deadliest war in American history? Was it really all about slavery? And how did a country that was barely 80 years old almost fall apart completely? Let's find out. To understand why the Civil War happened, we need to talk about how different the North and South had become. See, up in the North, you had factories, cities, and immigrants arriving from Europe. The economy was based on manufacturing and trade. Slavery had been mostly abolished by the early 1800s. Down in the South, completely different world. The economy ran on agriculture, cotton, tobacco, rice, all grown on huge plantations. And all of it relied on enslaved labor. Cotton was so profitable that Southerners literally called it king cotton. The South's entire way of life depended on slavery. Their economy, their social structure, their political power, all of it. Now, every time a new state wanted to join the Union, the same fight broke out. Would it be a free state or a slave state? In 1820, Missouri wanted to join as a slave state. This made northern states nervous because it would give slave states more power in the Senate. So they came up with the Missouri Compromise. Missouri becomes a slave state, Maine becomes a free state, and slavery is banned north of the 3630 line. Problem solved for exactly 30 years. Fast forward to 1850. The U.S. just won a war against Mexico and gained a ton of new territory. Time for the same old question, slavery or no slavery. They created another compromise, but this time it included the Fugitive Slave Act, a law that said even people in free states had to help catch runaway slaves. Northerners, wait, we have to help enforce slavery now? Dude, uncool. Then in 1854, Senator Stephen Douglas passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which let these new territories vote on slavery themselves. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers rushed to Kansas to influence the vote. What followed was called Bleeding Kansas because people literally started killing each other over it. It was basically a preview of the Civil War. Then in 1857, the Supreme Court dropped the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott was an enslaved man who sued for freedom because his owner took him to free territory. The Supreme Court said, nope, black people aren't citizens. Congress can't ban slavery in territories. And actually, the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional this whole time. Northerners were furious. All their political victories just got erased. By 1859, a radical abolitionist named John Brown decided talking wasn't working anymore. He raided a federal armory at Harper's Ferry, hoping to spark a slave uprising. It failed spectacularly. Brown was captured and hanged. But in the North, he became a martyr. Songs were written about him. He was seen as a hero. In the South, they were terrified. They saw Brown as proof that Northerners wanted to start a violent slave rebellion. The country was a powder keg. All it needed was a spark. The election of 1860. The Democratic Party was so divided that it split in two. The Republicans nominated Abraham Lincoln, who opposed the expansion of slavery into new territories. Lincoln won. But here's the thing. He wasn't even on the ballot in most Southern states. He won 0 Southern states. The South looked at this and said, a president was just elected without us having any say. We've lost all political power. We're out. On December 20th, 1860, South Carolina seceded from the Union. Then Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas followed. 7 states formed the Confederate States of America, elected Jefferson Davis as president, and wrote their own constitution, which explicitly protected slavery forever. Lincoln, who wasn't even president yet, was like, guys, you can't just leave. Confederacy. Watch us. The crisis point came at Fort Sumter, a federal fort in South Carolina. Lincoln tried to resupply it peacefully. Jefferson Davis said, nope. And on April 12, 1861, Confederate forces opened fire. After 34 hours of bombardment, the fort surrendered. The Civil War had begun. Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion. 4 more states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, joined the Confederacy. Now there were 11 Confederate states versus 23 Union states. Let's see who wins. Both sides are super confident. Here's what both sides thought. North, we have more people, more factories, more railroads, more money. This will be over in 3 months. South, we have better generals, we're defending our homeland, and Europe needs our cotton. Easy win. Narrator, it would not be easy. It won. The first major battle was at Bull Run in July 1861. People from Washington actually brought picnics to watch because they thought it'd be entertaining. The Union was winning at first, but then Confederate reinforcements arrived. A general named Thomas Jackson held his position like a stone wall, earning him the nickname Stonewall Jackson. The Union Army broke and ran. Complete chaos. Everyone realized this was going to be a long war. For the first 2 years, the Confederates kept winning in the East. Their general, Robert E. Lee, was brilliant. He defeated Union army after Union army. The Union general, George McClellan, was super cautious. He kept overestimating Confederate numbers and refusing to attack. Lincoln got so frustrated he wrote, "If you don't want to use the army, I would like to borrow it." Ouch. In September 1862, Lee invaded Maryland. But a Union soldier found Lee's battle plans wrapped around some cigars. Even with Lee's entire strategy in his hands, McClellan barely won the Battle of Antietam. It was the bloodiest single day in American history, 22,000 casualties. But it was enough of a victory for Lincoln to do something major. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring all enslaved people in Confederate territory were free. This didn't immediately free anyone. The Union didn't control Confederate territory yet, but it changed everything. The war was no longer just about preserving the Union. It was about ending slavery. It also meant Britain and France couldn't support the Confederacy without looking like they supported slavery. The South's hope for European help? Gone. In July 1863, Lee invaded Pennsylvania. The armies met at Gettysburg. They fought for 3 days. On day 3, Lee ordered pickets charge, 12,000 men charging across open ground at entrenched Union forces. It was a slaughter. Half became casualties. The attack failed. Lee had to retreat back to Virginia. The Confederacy would never recover. Same time out west, General Grant captured Vicksburg, giving the Union control of the Mississippi River. The tide had turned. Lincoln finally found his general, Ulysses S. Grant. Grant understood something simple. The North had more men and more resources. They could sustain losses the South couldn't. His strategy? Constant pressure, attack, attack, attack. Never let Lee rest. It was brutal, but it worked. While Grant fought Lee in Virginia, General William Sherman captured Atlanta, then marched to the sea, destroying everything in a 60-mile-wide path. Sherman's strategy was total war. Destroy the South's ability and will to fight. It was devastating, but it worked. By April 1865, Lee's army was surrounded, starving, and outnumbered. On April 9, 1865, Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. Grant offered generous terms. Soldiers could go home, keep their horses, and wouldn't be prosecuted. The war was over. Over 600,000 Americans were dead, more than all other American wars combined until Vietnam. 5 days after Lee's surrender, Lincoln went to see a play. An actor named John Wilkes Booth snuck into Lincoln's theater box and shot him in the head. Lincoln died the next morning. The nation had just won the war, and now their president was dead. The Civil War answered 2 huge questions. 1. Can states leave the Union? No. The Union is permanent. 2. Is slavery allowed in America? No. The 13th Amendment abolished it everywhere, but it left many questions unanswered. What rights would freed slaves have? How would the South rejoin the Union? What would equality actually look like? The period after the war, called Reconstruction, was supposed to rebuild the South and integrate freed slaves into society. It went poorly. Without Lincoln's leadership, Reconstruction was inconsistent. White supremacists used violence and voter suppression to regain power. By 1877, federal troops left the South. Jim Crow laws enforced racial segregation for the next 80 years. Many of the war's questions remained unresolved. The American Civil War was the most important event in American history. It kept the nation together and ended slavery, but it cost over 600,000 lives and left scars that took generations to heal. The war showed that Americans were willing to fight and die for what they believed in, both for preserving the Union and for ending slavery. But it also showed how close the nation came to destroying itself. In the end, the Union survived. Slavery ended, and the United States would go on to become the most powerful nation on earth. But the war's legacy, questions about race, equality, and what America truly stands for, are still with us today. So there's the American Civil War. Hope you learned something. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.